Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a very quick break. Thank you to our roundtable partner, Helm 360, for bringing this timely topic to the event. Technology is changing everything, especially after COVID-19. The legal industry isn't immune to these big shifts. From how to compete in the market to how attorneys practice law firms are feeling the pressure to adapt or be left behind. However, the buzz phrase digital transformation often paints an oversimplified picture of what it means to keep current. But change is necessary. And here to lead the discussion on the COVID-19 revolution, how next generation technologies are transforming law firms today, is Helm 360's very own Susanna Mickelson, Sales Director, Helm 360. And joining her on stage is Bim Dave, Executive Vice President, Helm 360, Honorable Nelson Diaz, Senior Attorney, Dilworth Paxons, and Director at Pico Energy, Tina Elsner, Director of Client Value, Stern, Kesley, Goldstein, and Fox, and Eric Lavelle, Partner, Lawyer, and Trademark Agent, and Manager at Laveri Legal Lab on Artificial Intelligence. Suzanne, I will leave you to take it from here.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We're super excited to be here and really talk about some incredibly important questions to each and every one of us. So I'd like to start with the first question about, artificial intelligence. And there's so much buzz in today's industry. What does it really mean? How does it improve our individual organizations, our law firms? And, is it really here to replace our business or improve our business? When we look back from when Steve Jobs first talked about this, it really started to be introduced in 1984. So, Eric, I'd like to pose the first question to you, if I may. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, AI, what are the top 3 features that you are looking in a new tool, such as artificial intelligence, that might be extremely beneficial to you and your organization?
Well, thank you, Susanna. And thank you for the opportunity of speaking today. First of all, we need a tool which we can trust. That means a tool which provides reliable and explainable results. This is important, among other things, to make sure that they are really beneficial to our clients and also to protect our own liability as lawyers. We cannot simply trust solution which provides results which we cannot validate or challenge. It's important to, when we look at, for example, AI technology, neural network, to be more thorough than we used to be with simple automation tools. When we were looking at simple automation solution, this was not so much of an issue. It only did what it was automated to do. However, when we start to introduce machine learning, for example, neural networks, which have a bunch of hidden layers, we don't understand, we cannot trace the information, how it's processed in the neural networks. And there's a reason why the mathematicians call them hidden layers. It's because it's very difficult to probe and understand what goes in the black box, what happens there. It requires at least some very strong validation of the results in all possible situations before adoption. So the first key element for us is reliability. Second, we need the tool to be easy to onboard. Tools that require complex setups or which need to be reconfigured for every situation are quickly abandoned within the firm. So we've had some experience with such tools which were only suited for a larger project, very large transaction. The time consumed to set them up was so long that in the end there was only a limited amount of cases where we could actually use them, and it limited the adoption. And in the end also, even with larger cases or project where we would need them, people were reluctant to use them because of the complexity of using such tool. So then that leads me to the third aspect, the third important aspect of the solution for us. We needed to be flexible enough to be open to our clients, which means to provide interface which allow to integrate our clients' processes. When we were testing solutions a couple of years ago, we were only looking for their internal functions, how they could process the information for us. We were basically trying to buy software as we did 10, 20, 30 years ago. Today, we look more at the process to use them, and we have to take into consideration how they interact with the client's information and workflow. Some of our clients have platforms for document management which are more advanced than our own technology, while some others are completely dependent on us and are not so much technology inclined. So we have a mix of both, with in between a bunch of clients which are interested in technology but may not have the infrastructure to build their own API to couple with our technological tools. So for some larger business, we are required to use their platform, for example, for billing, for document management, which sometimes are not well suited for our own professional obligation. And even with smaller clients, this year I had a new client which underwent a very thorough audit on its cybersecurity because it's a strong issue in their business line. And in the end, whenever I use a solution, I needed to comply with their cybersecurity background or platform, and it has to be acceptable for the client. So when we introduce a solution, it has to fit with the process. When we're providing service to large clients, it has to fit with their billing requirements, document management, but it also must be not too obtrusive for smaller clients. And when we're talking about such client interface, we need to take into consideration the cybersecurity of the solutions, including when it's used by the clients themselves. Cybersecurity here is not strictly speaking, encryption or transfer protocol on the internet. It includes some social engineering concern, how the clients may misuse the interface or become vulnerable when using it, vulnerable to phishing or other such similar attempts that could both become a threat for the client, but also for our own platform. So that openness, which is a very important characteristic now for the solution that we are looking at, needs to be balanced with appropriate cybersecurity.
Thank you, Eric. So that was very informative, and I appreciate you taking the time to, really identify your three components, which is really what I heard: reliability, ease of use, and flexibility. And when you're looking for solutions, and I'd like to ask Bim to take 1 minute, if possible, to really, from a service perspective and delivering and working with clients, what you see as the three important top features in a new AI tool.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sue. Firstly, I totally agree with the points that Eric made in terms of deploying a solution that makes sense and focusing on implementation simplicity, because I think that's part of the key to success with AI. Just briefly, what I would say is that rather than looking at features from an AI perspective, when you're looking at technologies, I always tell customers to kind of flip it on its head and actually think about what value can this solution deliver to us, to really simplify how you're looking at a product, because we can all get wowed by the shiny bells and whistles that a product can offer. And the kind of key things that I always look at when I'm looking at these kind of technology solutions are, A, can it save me time and cost? Can it provide me intelligence quicker? than I can today. So again, you know, contributing to efficiency. And thirdly, can it improve my customer experience, right? Can I deliver a better value to my customers by employing a product that has some kind of AI technology associated with it? And I think by doing that, you kind of keep yourself true to the solution, and you're delivering something that actually is valuable to your business as well.
Perfect, Bim. Thank you. And you're absolutely right. You know, looking at, you know, not just reliability, ease of use, flexibility, but then, you know, providing in a service and industry what makes really cost effective and improves the customer's experience is really what brings success to AI, artificial intelligence, and tools. So thank you. I'd like to move into the next question. And Tina, what I'd like to do is ask you a question really about, you know, implementation software, how, you know, I know that you work for a large law firm that's very IP boutique specific. And, you know, what is the high number of new technologies that are being thrown at organizations? How are they creating adaptation? You know, does this make it overwhelming, frustrating for you and your firm to start these projects? And where do you see that vision going?
Thank you, Susanna. Yeah, I think it can be frustrating to the end users in our firm, for both of our attorneys and our staff who interact with these technology solutions. So even though, as Eric and Bim mentioned, you know, if you have a great product that is quote unquote easy to implement and flexible, when you're doing several implementations at the same time, it can get frustrating because people are always having to learn a new system. So what we try to do, and I'm sure a lot of firms out there try to do this as well when they're looking at this issue, is we really focus on the change management, which includes our communication with the people who are going to be interacting with the systems. And we try to answer first the why. Why are we making this change? Before we even start training them on the new system, we really like to focus on how it's going to make things more efficient and better for the client. That's the first thing we try to do. And, you know, sometimes these changes are client driven. The clients have asked us for things, but especially if it's something that our law firm has chosen to do without a specific request from a client, we really try to couch that in the terms of we need to remain competitive. We aren't just competing with other IP boutiques or law firms. We're also competing with alternative legal service providers, and sometimes even with our clients who have large in-house staffs that they might be trying to take some of this work in-house. So we have to always try to be as efficient and effective as possible. Another thing that we try to do when there are several implementations that are either coming at the same time or in quick succession is to coordinate those. So we have all the project managers have regular meetings and discuss what's happening and what the timing needs to be and whatever the interaction needs to be between those systems. Because we want to make sure that if we bring one system up online, it doesn't sort of knock out other systems. But we also want to make sure that we're getting full and efficient cross-system implementations. So if there's something we can take advantage of in one new system and use it in another system, we want to try to do that. Hopefully that will make it easier for the end users as well. And we really also rely on our training professionals to help out here because they're the ones that are interacting with the end users. They're the ones that are getting the questions. They're the ones that are seeing basically where the friction is happening. So we make sure to keep those lines of communications open. As Eric mentioned, he talked about that integration with the client's processes and workflows, which I think is something that's very important to us. Though it is difficult because a lot of our clients have either their own proprietary systems or they have billing or docketing systems that don't quite match up with what we're trying to implement. So trying to figure out how to make sure all of that works together and is easy for our end users is really important to focus on. Lastly, I'd like to say, you know, change management is often trying to figure out who the person or people are who could lead that change, who are not involved in the project implementation. And so we really focus on who the change agent could be for any particular implementation. As we all know, just because a firm leadership, a managing partner says, we're going to make this change, it doesn't really mean that it's going to happen or everybody's going to accept the change. You know, there's various passive ways for not implementing changes. So what we really try to do is identify within the firm who the change agent might be, and it might be different people or different positions even for the same software solution. So we look at, is it this going to be a partner or firm leader, or is it going to be a staff person? Especially for us in intellectual property, we have highly trained secretaries, patent prosecution secretaries, and sometimes they are really the change agents. If they see something that's going to make their life easier, they will push their attorneys to adopt that particular solution. So yeah, to sort of circle back, it can be frustrating, but we try to do what we can to explain why we're doing something, how it benefits the client, how it benefits the law firm, and then really try to make it as easy as possible while we're implementing the changes.
Thank you so much. So basically, you know, just to recap, I've heard that, you know, communication is key, and really picking the right client agent and why we're doing this change. So just because, you know, like you had mentioned, the managing partner is saying we're changing as a law firm, it's really about getting the whole team and company and law firm under and behind you and selecting the right individuals to take that role. Because it can be overwhelming, but then working with the right service providers and the individuals within a firm to try to minimize that overwhelmingness. Nelson, you know, you have such vast experience in so many areas, not just from law practice, but from being an honorable judge and working in different organizations. You've seen change come across and technology coming into that play. How would you describe, and if you could take a minute and just kind of elaborate on, you know, is it overwhelming? Is it frustrating? And what are your perspectives of this?
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you for having me. And having no tools back in 1991 when I started with the court and administratively, the biggest challenge is to learning to use the tools you already have. And so many other lawyers have totally depended upon assistance from their assistants instead of being able to manage that themselves. So that's a big issue. And as a result, there's been an acceleration towards digital, which it has transpired a lot faster in the COVID years than anyone would have expected, only because we had it, but we had no idea that it could be utilized in the way we have. And even the basic administration has been totally automated. And as it relates to that, you know, courts and governments have begun to be interested in digital activities because otherwise they couldn't participate. But it also brings, when you have this digital period, it also brings the issue of cybersecurity. And so cybersecurity now has been an element that has been taken over pretty much by lawyers and general counsels in many of the firms. So the improvement is absolutely necessary in terms of walls that you develop, and then terminology never was in our own vocabulary. But in further improvement of the documentations within our own firms in terms of contracts and other real estate documents and so forth, and the access to all of those, and then the modernization of communication methods as we're having right now. I mean, we're doing this as if we were doing it all the time, and we didn't do this. We didn't know what a Zoom was before the COVID period. So lawyers are taking a much more active role in all of these elements. And so video conferencing is becoming an element that we can now serve the client better. And unfortunately, now we're more available 24 hours a day because we can see the client on the other side. But the biggest change within many of the litigators is that the remote process of hearings within the courts and depositions. Now we're doing that almost automatically, so we don't have to fly out to California to take a depositions, which is obviously a saving on your body, on your time, and on the client's expenditures. And firms and courts have gotten very efficient in conducting these types of processes. And other changes in recognition that the attorneys can, for the most part, practice remotely, which was something, you had to be in the office, you had to be in the courtroom. That has made a bigger impact, I think, than anything else that we've seen. And this is particularly true, I think, of younger attorneys. Also, guys like me, I get into it, but there's some resistance with regard to people who still have to depend upon their assistants. But one of the issues that I think that negatively impacts is that the lack of socialization with regard to the practice of law. Now there's more of an individuality, there's a less give and take, and the nature of working through complex legal issues, are somewhat more oriented towards an individual, including most of their research, even before we can have that interaction. So those are sort of in a capsule level. I could talk to you a lot more about it, but it has really been a year that I've seen more transition than I've seen in all of my life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Our next question is going to go to BIM, and it's really to talk about, what we're experiencing with working from home. This past year, every company, every organization has really been hit hard with forcing its change and how they're going to go about their business. So BIM, how much of a problem is collaboration in a work from home world? Being able to connect with one another and the lower skilled resource, which was much easier to do when we were all in the same place, when we were all working within one facility, one building. And how can technology influence collaboration, upskilling resources, and onboarding new people?
Yes, thank you, Susanna. So it's a challenge, right? Like I think on our journey as a software vendor providing legal solutions to this community, one of the common trends that we've seen over the last 24 months, pretty much, as people have kind of learned to transition to this work from home culture, has been really in a couple of key areas, right? One is from a client experience perspective, and I think Nelson kind of touched on this just now, which is, when you're dealing with some complex legal scenarios, it's really difficult to have those conversations sometimes and get across, empathy and other emotions through a video chat, right? Like it's much easier to do a lot of those things in person. Relationship development is much easier in person because at the end of the day, we're all here to grow our businesses and talk to potential customers as we want to grow what we do. But I think fundamentally what it's opened up is an opportunity to use some technology solutions to solve some of those problems. So I think some of the common scenarios that we're seeing are really focused around, firstly, individuals, right? So how do I enable my employees to be more successful, more self-sufficient, and have the support tools that they need to be able to do the everyday things that we kind of take for granted when we're sitting in the office and we can kind of shout across to, Joe Blogs across the room to go and get some advice, right? And it's everything from basic things, like I was talking to a client recently who showed me their SharePoint portal, which was their kind of holy grail of every single policy document that you could ever dream of, that enables you to figure out where you're supposed to get your expenses filed, how you access your time entry system, all the benefits packages, all that kind of stuff was all on this wonderful hub. And one of the common things that they used to get from a support perspective was the same situation with every person that was onboarded in the company would ask the same questions again and again and again, because it was just a minefield to go and find anything on that SharePoint portal. So in their case, one of the things that they wanted to do was leverage some technology solutions from us, from a chatbot technology perspective, to enable their end users to be able to ask a chatbot to go and retrieve something in natural language. So the same way that we would ask a question in an office, you ask a chatbot the same question and it goes and grabs that information from the same place, from the SharePoint portal, but it really simplifies that kind of search process to go and discover the information, and kind of gets you that information a lot quicker. So that kind of information retrieval and onboarding kind of transitions into then, when you think about some of the kind of onboarding side of things, when we're bringing in paralegals, entry-level attorneys that are there to really deliver good quality legal solutions to senior partners and kind of the rainmakers in a law firm, but allowing you to then kind of reduce the cost of delivery, right, so that you can make more profit on your matters at the end of the day. But in order for that to happen, though, that talent pool that's coming into the organization really needs to be developed, right? And as we know, we all came out of university. Some of us came out of university with a degree in something, whether it's law or technology or computer science. It taught us something, but it didn't teach you how to practice that something, right? And that's what you learn by being on the job, asking questions from people who have the experience, working with those senior lawyers to be able to, impart some of that knowledge and really guide and mentor and, nurture that talent so that they can become, the future rainmakers of a law firm. And ultimately, what we see is some real gaps in terms of that process, because again, if I'm and I think we've all experienced this, you join a new company and you're kind of hesitant as to whether you want to go and ask a question because it sounds like a stupid question in your head. Those are the kind of things that you kind of miss out on, where you could build a relationship with somebody that's sitting in your office, where you could go and have a conversation with them on the side and maybe not make a fool of yourself by asking a silly question. And getting an answer to it so you could be more productive and learn and evolve as a result of it. Whereas, that barrier that's there, this from this kind of remote working model kind of puts a little bit of a dampener on that situation. And it's really thinking about how do you solve those problems by, building library banks of FAQs to enable your new people to come on board quicker, giving them the tools that they need to really have that kind of assistant approach, like technology assistant approach, to go and grab information or go and retrieve simple answers to questions. Because when we look at some of those scenarios, and it's very typical with not just law firms, but pretty much every business you go to, the challenge is always the same, right? It's really how do we answer those questions in the most efficient way to reduce pressure on help desk, which I'm sure everyone can appreciate that our IT teams, across the world have been really challenged during this period to make sure that they can give the right level of support to individuals sitting at home with so many different variations in terms of their infrastructure that can prevent them from having, solid conversations with customers and, not have interruptions with the technology services that allow them to kind of communicate and deal with matters, relating to the work that they're doing. So lots of challenges there, but really, with the way that I see it, is that some of the technology solutions around, particularly in the chatbot space, can really help simplify some of that stuff and enable, very, very simple ways of being able to answer those questions or retrieve information to enable people to be able to onboard quickly. And just kind of, again, like tagging onto that is really then being able to develop learning plans, leverage solutions like, for example, Moodle, training platforms to help to measure and engage your audience so that you're giving them the tools they need to be successful, right? So building learning plans, shipping those out from a electronic perspective, and then helping to guide them through that process, right? So that you're giving them what they need to be successful. So that I think kind of covers some of the internal side of things, and then just flipping it to the client side of things. Really, there has to be a big focus on client experience, right? In that we want to make sure that from a remote working perspective, as we've kind of alluded to earlier, there are challenges with really making sure that you connect with your customer, you keep them engaged, and really make sure that you are doing the work in the most efficient way to deliver the best quality solution to them. So again, another great scenario that we've been working with a Canadian law firm on is how they can collaborate as a distributed team on matters without necessarily being in the same office, right? And the use case there is really using products like Microsoft Teams and adding a chatbot like Termi, our solution, into that room, so that as you're having virtual conversations within your group chat about a specific matter, being able to pull that information and retrieve that information back from whatever system in a really nice and easy way.
Thank you, Bim. That was great insight on, what we're doing with working from home, the challenges, collaborating, really trying to give law firms today ease of access, because we all realized that we had to change. And, we're so dependent on, like you said, having somebody right next to us and collaborating and, being able to provide tools to make things easier and more efficient and user-friendly really is helpful. So thank you for that. I'd like to go to our next question, and I'll start with Nelson on that. So, we've been having a lot of conversation about, change and technology and, with the pandemic and COVID. And, last year was very interesting. People have had lots of anxiety over the change and how do they improve their business. So my question to you, Nelson, is, how much of what has happened due to COVID is leading law firms to implement and adapt new technology in order to survive? Are any of these changes related to how you interact with your customers going forward and today? So we're running a little low on time, so I'll give you 5 minutes to answer that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'll go quickly. Younger lawyers obviously have the capability to more easily convert into what is a remote process. And they like it because they can keep control of their lives. I think it's also extremely good because it gives, I think, the opportunity that women didn't have in the past of working remotely and being able to have families and being able to do things that we didn't have in the past with regard to being able to great talent that was lost by firms as a result of that. So now the remote working has given a family opportunity and a leverage and a balance that didn't exist before this remote process. So that's one thing I think has changed. I think the second thing that has been great in terms of a client relationship is that it's a lot more friendly than using a phone, because I can see you. I can see how beautiful you are. I can see the issues that are behind. They can demonstrate some activities right through the video screens. And so having that conversation with the client is not as good as having the client there, but is a heck of a lot better than using a phone. So that begins to develop a relationship. They know what you look like, and you know what they look like. Obviously, the biggest problem is the marketing part of the business. Marketing essentially is a one and eye, and whether they like you and the nurturing of that relationship. So that's the hardest part, is the nurturing. But in terms of the work activity, I think it's improved. Now, another issue really requires the issue of privacy. And you have no idea who's on the other side of the video screen. And so the issue of privacy and the relationship between a lawyer and his client and the privilege issue is extremely important. And when you're using totally a system that is continually controlled by the internet, you got the cyber security issue, and we're attacked on a regular basis. So I think that there is a change with regard to the use of legal assistance now, a change with regard to use of paralegals, and an increasing demand on the use of technology experts. The technology experts are absolutely necessary in order to protect yourself from liability, and liability on the issues of the privilege, and liability on the issues of information that you may have in your law firm. that is absolutely necessary to protect. So those are in sort of a summary way, I think has been the biggest impact that I've seen with regard to that whole relationship. But young people can adapt to anything. And I think that the young people adaptation to it has made it even a lot easier to transfer into the future.
Thank you. And you're absolutely correct. Young people do adapt a lot quicker, but having the technology experts, like you said, to help and assist, and cybersecurity is big on everyone's mind. You know, maybe that's another topic that we'll have at a different time. So absolutely. Tina, I'd like to see if you could take a minute and just talk about, you know, what you've seen in reference to the change with COVID and how it's interacting with your customers in order to survive.
Well, for us, I wouldn't say our basic client interactions have changed, other than we've moved to remote instead of the nice in-person meetings that Nelson was talking about. As an IP boutique, we've already had technology solutions that our clients asked us to implement, for example, docketing solutions. So that was all pre-COVID. So I think the biggest change is sort of on that marketing, nurturing of relationship, as Nelson put it, trying to continue to do that outreach in this sort of awkward manner. I do, with our managing partner, we always do client visits every year to find out how the firm is doing. And we've moved those to fully remote, which in some ways it's great for us because we don't have to travel out to see them, and we can do it a lot more efficiently. But it's, you know, you don't quite have that relationship building that you might have, especially for people you don't work with day in and day out. So I think that's right for us right now, the biggest issue.
Thank you, Tina. And you know, it's interesting that, you know, you touched on, you know, visiting with the clients. You and the managing partner always reached, you know, had the personal visits, and now you're doing a lot of them through Teams and Zooms. And that's the world that we live in. You know, this is where COVID has put us all in. We're working longer, and we just need to be a little bit smarter in how we approach that because we're not doing quite as much traveling. So thank you. So we have one more last question, and I'd like to start it off with Eric as responding to this. You know, we realize, and I think about the days that I worked at my firm, which was a couple of years ago, we'll just put it at that, where, you know, it's hard for attorneys to change. Change management is even harder. And where do we envision the beginning of 2020, at the end of 2021, in terms of how are we approaching new technology implementations because of the change that we see with the attorneys? And how do you go about helping them move along that process? So Eric, if you could take a couple minutes and just give us your feedback in perspective to that.
Yes, thank you. You're right. It's not easy for law firms to adopt new technology, especially larger firms where there's a lot of, there's an age gap sometimes between the partners or the more senior partners. Some of them are reluctant to the changes, and it's a very conservative profession. For implementing new technology, the first step for us is to get advice from experts in technology and experts in the technological transition from the human resource standpoint, which is an ongoing process for us at Lavity. We needed assistance to plan properly the transition and make sure that there was adoption of the solution that we decide to invest in. We can compare with what has been done with other similar law firms to some extent, and with our own past experience with some technologies, because we tried to adopt some technology, we kept some technologies or solution we did not keep or were failure once deployed within our staff. But this is sometimes difficult because, for one thing, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes, And for example, we don't want to buy a solution that in the end remains on our shelves because it's too complex to use. Also, every law firm is different. And as Susanna, you said when we were preparing the meeting, every lawyer is different. So what works for others might not work for us. For example, at Laverie, we have bilingual situation where most of our services are given in French, while some of our services are given in English. So we need solutions that adapt to that context. And we need to integrate them and integrate them properly from the average lawyer's perspective and not from the technology expert standpoint. It's probably easier for me to use a new solution, which is a bit complex, but I'm not the average lawyer at Laverie. Also, we can use these tools to develop our younger lawyers if we plan them properly, plan the integration properly, helping them to learn the practice of law, which is more important than the simple use of the tools. So, finally, we need to integrate all of that with the workflow of our clients' information, as I mentioned earlier. So for us, 2021 is a year to make the business case, to determine what makes sense for us, what's not so much cost effective, what is very efficient. And as you all know, there's a lot of smokes and mirrors for such technologies to determine which of them will bring us some beneficial impact for us and for our clients. So for us, 2021 is really a year of making such choices.
Thank you, Eric. Nelson, do you want to take a couple minutes and give us your perspective on, we realize change is hard. And just like Eric said, every attorney is different. Every law firm practice is a little bit different. We've all been in this legal environment for many years, so we know what some of these challenges are. But where do you envision by the end of 2021 approaching new technologies on the implementation perspective from an attorney's approach?
Yeah, I think some of the things that were not expected is the fact that commercial property now is less necessary. We are using less space. We don't need as much space in many of the regional offices. So the rental cost has been reduced. The expenses of lawyers going in and out of the offices and parking and food costs and some of the other elements and childcare is another area of benefit, I guess, to many lawyers. And I think that they like that. And that portion of it, whether or not it's going to change, I think this is a portion of a negotiable opportunity for many of the young lawyers coming into the profession. And because courts now can be virtual, they can find you anywhere, so you can pretty much practice from anywhere. And unlike that, we saw a screen one time of a person who was not properly capable to be on the screen with the judge. We have to be prepared for that opportunity when there is a relationship and the courts themselves are beginning to improve and necessarily improve. And the COVID issue with regard to juries has also improved greatly because now you have more and more of the information coming on the screens. So you need a lot more pretrial activity in order to determine what's going to be shown on a screen so that the trial goes through smoothly. And so now even jurors have access to the evidence with regard to a screen. And in the past, we sort of didn't provide them with any of that information to go back on deliberations. And now you can pretty much give it to them and they can discuss it in the jury deliberations. So it is a new world of information for the process and hopefully bringing it to a better judicial system that brings fairness in terms of determination instead of just using your memory or just using your writing so everybody writes about what they've heard instead of being able to really see the documentation and the evidence that has been shown in a trial. So that's a major change with regard to both the court process and jury process and the legal process. So that's a great improvement, I think, with regard to the judicial and legal system that I think will have to continue to get better in the coming years.
Nelson, I totally agree with you and with everything that everyone has said. You know, we are adapting to change quickly. It's not just us as individuals. It's not just us as law firms or organizations, but it goes to us as a nation. And what I've heard today basically is that, you know, we need from us as a service provider, Helm 360, is to really have, you know, beyond and meet your customers' needs. Have a tool that's reliable, that's easy to use, and that's customers facing, so that you can improve your business processes with all these challenges that we are hit every single day. So thank you, all of you. That was my last question. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak, all of you, and enjoyed the conversation tremendously.
Thank you, Susanna. And thank you, Helm 360, for your support. And thank you to BIM, Honorable Nelson, Tina, and Eric for the deep dive into that conversation. Coming up next, we shift our focus to cloud solutions for dispersed workforces, understanding your risks and benefits. Click on the session link in the chat, and I'll meet you in that session room very shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.